Tonight on The Computer History Museum presents Revolutionaries.
Computer science is the one discipline where instead of you telling your work when it's done, your work tells you when it's done.
Marissa Mayer is an internet revolutionary. As the first woman engineer at Google, she led teams that developed some of the search giant's most important products. Marissa joined us to discuss her life and career just weeks before being named CEO of Yahoo.
Let's go over a little bit how you ended up in computer science. I know you've talked about this. You started out, actually, you were going to be a doctor, a pediatrician, right?
Yeah, I really was very interested in math and science. I was good at it, and I really wanted to help people. I liked kids, and I was pretty sure I wasn't just going to be a pediatrician, I was going to be a pediatric neurosurgeon.
That's pretty specific.
Teaching at a med school and taking exceptional cases on the side. And I went to Stanford, and I was really quite certain I was going to double major in biology and chemistry. And I spent my first year doing that, and when I went home, I started comparing notes with friends who'd gone to other schools, and I realized that, well, it was a lot of memorization, and I was good at memorization. We'd all taken the same classes. And I really couldn't justify, why was I going so far away? Why was I going to a school that was so expensive if the classes and the memorization were all the same? So I started thinking about things that I could do uniquely at Stanford. And in the spring quarter of my freshman year, I had taken a requirement called computer science for non-majors. And in fact, the professor the first day stood up and said, extensive data collected on students in this class has shown that of the 400 of you, it's a big introductory level course, of the 400 of you, exactly 2 will go on to take any additional computer science at all. And apparently I was one of those two. But I really loved programming. I was really excited about it. I found a bachelor's program called Symbolic Systems, which was interdisciplinary. It rolled together philosophy, psychology, linguistics, and computer science, which is basically, the way it stitches together is it's cognitive psychology, how do people learn, philosophy, logic, and how do people reason, linguistics, how do people express themselves, and computer science, can you have a computer that does the same? And I really came to the realization that I was much less interested in cutting up brains, and I was much more interested in how they worked, how they learned, how they reasoned, and what ultimately could be done with computers to try and make us all smarter and make life more convenient. And so I really got very interested in that, and then I went on to do a master's in computer science.
I mean, it's such a specific major.
It is.
I don't know how many people pull together a major like that.
Well, it's a program at Stanford. Now it graduates, I think, on the order of about 40 people a year. And there's actually a surprising number of symbolic systems majors, particularly in product design. So actually, there's a guy, Brian Rakowski, at Google, who was the original product manager for Gmail and Chrome. Reid Hoffman, it turns out, was also symbolic systems from LinkedIn. Scott Forstall from Apple, also symbolic systems. So there's a group of us.
There's a group of you who had this very specific major. I wonder, so you took this class. What was it, and I actually think it's important to talk about this, what excited you about computers?
Well, I liked the act of programming. I liked, building something, letting it run, seeing if it ran correctly. I liked the act of debugging. It was just a different sensation. One of my classmates in school once said, computer science is the one discipline where instead of you telling your work when it's done, your work tells you when it's done. Right? Because like in almost any other discipline, you can decide, yeah, my paper's good enough, or it was supposed to be 5 pages, and it's 4.5, but it's, I've edited enough, I've gone over it enough, I've proofread it enough, I'm done. But in computer science, your work either works or it doesn't. And yes, you can polish it at the end with comments and factor the code better and do things like that. But it really is the one discipline where you're interacting with your project, and your project gets to tell you when it's finished. And there was something about that I really liked. I liked that act of building.
It's cool, right? And women should be able to build things too, right? So one of the things I've been doing some research on women in computing and in the tech industry, and a lot of times people say, well, they're not risk takers as much as men are, and so that's why we don't see them in startups. You actually then, you got out of school and you actually took a big risk because you were offered a job at McKinsey & Company, which is a very established firm that has, many, Fortune 500 executives have come out of there. But in the end, you went with a little startup. You took a risk, really, by making that choice. What were you thinking? Okay, this is risky, but I'm going to do it. I mean, what made you go there and not to McKinsey & Company?
Well, I mean, it's important to think in context because it was a very different time. It was 1999. It was the height of the first internet bubble. And so, everyone had a startup. Everyone was looking for programmers. It was a very, very good time to have a master's in computer science and be graduating. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I went and I interviewed with all kinds of different companies, big technology consulting companies, management consulting companies, software startups, big software companies. I interviewed for some teaching programs because I had taught a bit at Stanford, and so I interviewed for some of those, and ended up with 14 offers. And so I just kind of kept collecting them because I do think that I end up making good decisions when I've got a lot of options. And so I actually kind of overwhelmed myself with options. And then I sat down over spring break and thought about how I was going to make the decision. And I started thinking about the best decisions I had ever made. And I tried to pick things that were very different from each other and figure out what they had in common. And going to Stanford, I put in that bucket, changing my major to symbolic systems, spending a summer working at SRI, the Stanford Research Institute, in the AI lab, spending a summer working in Switzerland at the Union Bank of Switzerland's research lab. And I thought, okay, what of those 4 decisions, what do they have in common? And I realized that they all had 2 things in common. I always worked with the smartest people I could find, because I think when you surround yourself by smart people, they just challenge you and elevate the way you think and make you think harder and deeper about things. And I always did something I was a little not ready to do. Like, I remember at the end of each of those first days, like being at Stanford, or like calling my father to tell him my major was symbolic systems when I couldn't even really describe it to myself, let alone him. Or like being in Switzerland where I didn't speak German and I got in trouble for how I bought grapes, because it turns out you buy produce in Europe differently than you do here. And so you're supposed to print the sticker yourself.
You're a serial risk taker a little bit, right?
And so, but that feeling at the end of the day where you're like, what have I gotten myself into? And I realized that sometimes when you have that feeling and you push through it, something really great happens. And so actually Google came into the picture quite late. Over spring break, I had only had about 12 or 13 of those offers. Google came up on April 22nd. I had promised myself I was going to make a decision on May 1st. I went to Google, I think it was on a Monday afternoon. I interviewed with Larry and Sergey at a ping pong table because that was their conference table, also the recreation for the office. And then afterwards, I heard them get up and kind of gather the whole office, and it kind of sounded like everyone left. And Heather, our original office manager, came in and said, "I'm sorry, I know that it was very important for you to get all of the interviews done today so you can make a decision soon, but the entire company is just left with Larry and Sergey to go to one of the venture capital firms, so you're going to have to come back tomorrow." Because they were actually pitching their Series B at that time, so there was like no one left to interview. And it was actually when I came back the next day, the company was kind of growing by the day. That first day there were only 7 people. The next day I sat down, and one of the people I sat down with was Amit Patel, who about halfway through the interview said to me, "I'm sorry, I don't really know what to ask you. I've only been working here for 2.5 hours." And so, I mean, literally, because the company was so small, you had to meet everyone. And Amit was like, "I turned up this morning, and they said there's someone coming in to interview, so I'm interviewing you, but I don't really know what I'm interviewing you for because I don't really know what I do yet either."
What's amazing is you still took this job, so
And so, but I looked at it, and it was, I mean, I remember one of the nights when I was making my decision, looking at the two business cards, because there was the McKinsey card, and it was like, 100-pound cardstock. It was like really thick, and it didn't even have like the name of the company. It was like, the name was in one lower corner for McKinsey, and the other person's name was in the lower right-hand corner, like nothing in the center of the card. And then there was the Google card, and I still have like Larry and Sergey's original cards, where you could it was like on like the typing paper equivalent, and it was like this bright. It was actually during the days when we had our big puffy original logo. Eventually, we slimmed it down, like the summer of '99, but it was this big puffy logo with the exclamation point. If you looked at it, you could see the dot matrix printer that printed it, and if you looked really close, you could see the perforated edges where they had torn the business cards apart themselves, which explained all the schnibbles on the floor when I interviewed, because there were always like little white pieces of dust all over the floor, because everyone was busy tearing apart their own business cards. And so it really was, in the very early days, it was a big dichotomy, but I really felt that Google represented the smartest people of the different companies I talked to, and something I felt not ready to do. There were 8 different search engines. They were all pretty good at the time. The search engine market was very fractured. It wasn't clear why the world needed another search engine. And a lot of the other companies were great, but I just realized that I would learn more going to Google and trying to build a company and be in the room as the decisions get made and understand, why would you do the Yahoo deal, or when do you decide to roll out image search, and being in the room for that, then I would be giving advice to companies and then walking out as the decision got made. And so I realized that I was going to learn even more, being at Google, even if we failed, than I was other places.
I mean, it was definitely a brave decision, and obviously it has thrust you into the spotlight in ways you probably never imagined.
I mean, I think that I remember, it's funny because I tend to analyze things a lot, so I like to do matrices where sort of like one option per line, different facets for each column, and I have some of the original matrices I did as I was making that decision that included like salary, location, happiness index, failure index, and all that. And to my credit, I actually gave Google 100 times more likely chance of succeeding than any of the other startups, because I gave them a 2% chance of success, when I gave all the other startups a 0.02% chance of success. And so, but still, it was a long shot in any case.
Well, it paid off. What was it like? You were the first woman engineer they hired, right? What was it like? What were you working on? What was it like to work at a table with all these other guy computer engineers? Did you even think about it? I mean, you'd already been in classes with all men probably as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one of the things that I'll always say is, people ask me what was it like to be a woman at Google? What is it like to be a woman at Google? I just don't frame it that way. It's not like I walk into the office in the morning and think, what is it like? What will my experience today as a woman be like, right? What is my experience as a Googler like, and a geek? And being a geek at Google is great. Like, you're surrounded by all kinds of other people who are excited about the same technologies and wanting to build the same interesting things and achieve these visions. And so, my experience has always been one of that. But I do think it was, we just had so many different ideas and places we could take things. I started about a week apart from Paul Buchheit, who went on to basically be the creator of Gmail, now at Y Combinator. And Paul and I were basically programming buddies. So Larry and Sergey said, okay, we need one of you to build ads, and we need one of you to build product search so people can find things to buy online. And they were like, and then we need you to review the other one's code. And so Paul took product search and I took ads, and we started programming and doing design reviews and things for each other. And so I was trying to figure out how to match ads to the searches, and Paul was working on how to actually find things that were for sale in the middle of our index. And so it was a very, very fun time. Interesting, our first task, however, was not product search or ads. Our first task, which is actually great because in some of the pictures you can see it, our first task was to hang the vinyl banner that said Google in front of the office. which I'm embarrassed to say, like, it took us, being engineers and being somewhat perfectionistic, it took us a better part of an afternoon to like find, we were on the second floor, so we had to get the banner up high, and we were above like this frozen yogurt shop on University Avenue in Palo Alto, sort of near the bike shop there. And there were these two balconies, and we needed to get the sign hanging and centered between the two. And so
you really
we were
spent, you
engineering
wanted to
this
make
all like,
sure
throughout the day. But some of our early pictures of that office, you can see that banner that Paul and I hung the first day. And it was ironic, but this past year, literally almost to the day of my 12th anniversary of the company, I was in Shanghai, and I ran into a Chinese venture capitalist, and he said, how long have you been at Google? And I said, I've been there 12 years. And he's like, you know, I feel like I found out about Google about 12 years ago. He was like, I was sitting eating lunch on University Avenue, and there were these two kids trying to hang this sign. And I was like, that was me. That was my first job. Like, it is almost 12 days. It's almost 12 years to the day. It was just such a small world to run into this guy, but it was really funny to hear him recount Paul and my like very uncoordinated adventure hanging incredible. The sign.
I mean, that sort of makes you think there's some strange mystic thing going on in the universe, well, even if you're a computer scientist.
Or that the tech world is very small, and you're very likely to run into people like that. So
I think it probably is. You know, so you've been there, the company has grown. You have been put in a role now as being a sort of one of the few sort of out there women computer scientists. Because we don't see that very often. Usually we hear about geeky guys who are like up all night programming by themselves. And probably you don't fit that image for people. So I wonder, is it really true? Is it just a bunch of, most of the time, geeky guys? You seem to prove that it's not.
I mean, I think that one of the things that holds computer science back on both sides of the gender issues are stereotypes. Right? No one wants to be a stereotype. Right? And you know, everyone wants to know that they can achieve what they want, being who they are, being their authentic self. And I think that, you know, that's really what's important for young women in computer science. That's also true for men, to basically say, you know what, you can be girly, you can be a jock, right? You can be any of these types of people, and you can still be a great programmer and have an amazing impact through technology, and you can do that on your own terms. So I think that sometimes pop culture really shortchanges hackers, computer scientists, right, in building too much into that stereotype.
You've begun to mentor other women in technology. I mean, this is a topic you personally have decided is important. And I guess one question I would ask is, why is it important? If there are more women in computer science, will it change something? Do women bring something different to the field?
Well, I definitely think that, you know, one of the things we're seeing is the impact of technology is so broad, and when these technologies are deployed, they affect billions of people all over the world. And if you're building something for a diverse user base, it's helpful to have that user base reflected in the building process, right? There's more insights into how it's going to work, what's not going to work well for people in that process. So I think that ultimately it is helpful. But I think in terms of getting more people into the field, I do think that what you want is a multiplicity of role models or a multiplicity of mentors to actually understand all kinds of different types of people do this and are good at it. And I think, you know, that's really what mentoring is about, is to say, you know, look, you know, here's how I do this. I do this my way. You should do this your own way. But giving people some idea of the path and how to get there.
You've been working with a woman from Tanzania, Susan Mashibi, who is a fascinating woman. She's a pilot, and now she has a company in Tanzania that works sort of setting up, I guess, flight patterns in Tanzania, doing all this amazing. There were several companies, you said. Tell us a little bit about your relationship with her and what she's working on and what that's been like.
Sure. Well, there's a mentoring program through the State Department and Fortune magazine, and they identify 30 women leaders from all over the world, developing countries, and bring them to the US. And first they go to DC and they spend some time in the State Department. Then they go and spend almost a month with their mentors, shadowing you at work, really getting to know each other, and then the program concludes in New York City, where they get to go to Fortune and all kinds of different media companies there. And so I've done this the past 2 years. I had Catherine Nyambala from Kenya one year, and this year Susan Mashibe from Tanzania. And it's just been a really wonderful experience because I find that I learn a lot from them in terms of how they run their business and what some of their challenges are. And we get to share all kinds of ideas. In fact, it was really fun and interesting with Susan this past year because she was like, we need to map she's like, we need to map Tanzania, we need better maps. So we had rolled out MapMaker US, where people can edit the US map, and she's like, when do we have MapMaker for Tanzania? Like, how are we gonna get all the businesses in Tanzania online and searchable? And how are we gonna get checkout in Tanzania? We really need to be able to accept credit card payments in Tanzania. And so she was, it was sort of interesting to see how those products could ultimately play out in her role. But yeah, she is the first woman pilot from the country of Tanzania. She was actually educated at the University of Michigan, went home and tried to get work maintaining airplanes. And one of her mentors there said, why are you looking for work maintaining airplanes? Why don't you open up a company that maintains them? Which she did, and now she actually has a few different companies, because she's got the one that actually houses and maintains the airplanes, another one that schedules the different flight patterns for arrivals, another one that's more tied in with tourism, and it's really been fun to see someone who's really a leader and very entrepreneurial, and also help a little bit in terms of what her challenges are, and learn from her about my challenges.
Now, she's not a computer scientist, though she is an engineer, and so I guess meeting somebody like you from a huge company like Google, it must be wonderful for her. Do you also work with younger women who are interested in computer science?
I do. One of the programs I've run for almost the past 10 years at Google is the Associate Product Manager program, which is where we take new graduates in bachelor's and master's programs and put them through a 2-year program where they learn how to be a product manager at Google. And we take people who have backgrounds in computer science and bring them right into the discipline of product management. And in the early days I started it because basically we needed to hire product managers faster, and I had a bet with my boss. My boss was busy trying to hire product managers from industry, and a lot of product managers were either too sales focused, too marketing focused. Google's always been a very technical company where what was technically possible and what the engineers wanted to build drives a lot of the decisions around products. And we were hiring, you want to ultimately scale product management linearly with engineering. So if you have one product manager for every 10 engineers, that means you have to hire one product manager for every 10 engineers. And when we started having a product management group, our head of product management, Jonathan, who was my boss at the time, was hiring about one product manager every 2 months, where Wayne Rosing, our head of engineering, was hiring 8 engineers every week. And so I was like, we're scaling at like a 64-to-1 ratio. And so I said, I bet that I can grow new product managers faster than you can hire experienced ones. And Jonathan said, well, how are you going to do it? And I said, well, I'm going to find graduates from computer science programs that really understand not just technology, but the applications of it. And we're going to throw them in over their heads and give them a lot of responsibility, which is kind of what happened. There was another fellow who started right out of school just when I did. Salar Kamangar and I started. He was 23, I was 24, and we just kind of got thrown in over our heads, and Larry and Sergey just yelled at us until we became the people they needed us to become. I was like, we're going to do that with hopefully less yelling for the associate product managers, because it took a lot of yelling for us. But it ultimately has been a great way to find all kinds of young people who are just starting off their careers to mentor both men and women. And to date, we've hired almost 300 people into the program. So each year it's about 30 or 40 people coming in. And there's just a lot of really inspiring, great people who've got, some of our associate product managers, Brian Rakowski, who I mentioned earlier, was the very first hire, did Gmail and Chrome. Brett Taylor, now CTO at Facebook. came to Google and built the first version of Google Maps. There's been all kinds of really wonderful people coming through that program, and I've gotten to know some of them through that.
Why, I guess I would ask, why did they think it was important to have a diverse workforce? Do you think that having different kinds of people at the table gives you a better product in the end? So if you have women and African Americans, whatever the diversity is, does it give you a better product?
Oh, I absolutely think it gives you a better product. I think it's hard for me to say exactly what Larry and Sergey were thinking, but for both of them, they'd always wanted to start a company. They had spent a lot of time thinking about exactly what kind of company they wanted to start, from studying other companies in Silicon Valley to reading a lot of different management books and different philosophies. And they said, look, everything says that if you have a balanced workforce, and especially a very respectful, inclusive workforce that's inclusive of all different types of people, both genders, ethnicities, all types of people, you ultimately do end up building a better company, a more robust company that has better products.
Let's geek out here for a minute and talk about what you're doing right now.
Sure.
You're in charge of a really, what seems to me an incredibly important area right now for the future, which is all the local initiatives, what you're going to see on your mobile device. What are you working on right now that you can discuss with us? What kinds of, we're talking about everything. I saw you talk about, for example, you might be in a restaurant and you can also get an extra little menu on your mobile that'll tell you more than the menu the restaurant hands you, or where the bathroom is in the Computer History Museum, things like that.
Sure, and some of this stuff is very basic, but it just needs to work. So one of the things that's happened, especially in location, is that now that we all have these mobile devices and that they can locate you, you can understand a person's context and how to be helpful to them, really connect the physical world to the virtual world. You know where the person is in the physical world, and you know what on the web is relevant to that place, what menu is relevant, what information is relevant, what historical facts are relevant. And it's really fun to pull those things together. So some of the basics that have to work are local searches. Today on Google.com, the number of searches and the percentage of searches that are done every day that are locally oriented, 20%. So 1 in every 5 searches done on Google is about local information. So my team is working really hard on that. On the mobile phone, as you can imagine, the percentage is even higher. We're also working really hard on maps, and maps on the phone is something. How many people used maps on their phone today? This is sort of the insight that I had, one of the insights I had when I was picking Google. I took it for granted because I've always been a really curious person and I loved internet search. But when I was trying to figure out where I wanted to go, I was like, of these different companies I could work for, are there any of them where I could imagine using the product at least once a day? Because in 1999, you did 1 internet search a day. Today we all maybe do 20 or 50, or according to my search history, somewhere between 85 and 100. But if it starts with once a day. And when I realized after working on search for 10 years, search and related things, all of a sudden I realized I couldn't remember the last day when I hadn't used maps on my phone at least once. And I started to realize that that percentage and use case, especially as the map becomes more and more personalized, more and more useful, was just going to explode. And a lot of what was really fun and interesting and exciting right now was local, mobile, social. And so making sure that maps work on the phone is really important. Google Maps for mobile, which we call inside GMM, has more than 250 million active users of the product. So it's just a huge group of people who are using this on a daily basis. It's really very exciting. And then there's all kinds of fun things, because once you get the basics of local search down and you understand how all this information relates to location and you get maps down, you can start doing really interesting things that I like to refer to as contextual discovery. If I understand your context and where you are, what can I tell you? So, for example, if you're sitting in a restaurant, now we even have Google Maps indoors. We know that you're sitting in that restaurant. It might be the case that the waiter hands you one menu we can produce another menu that's a social menu. It shows you what the most popular dishes are, what dishes your friends liked. You know, you could be a tourist in a city, or you could just be someone local, but if with a little bit of location history, we can tell whether or not you've been somewhere before. And if you're standing in front of, I was in Austin for South by Southwest this past year, you know, me being there for the first time, give me facts about the state capitol building, right? If it's on your commute and you walk past it every day, show you the news. We should show you news. We should show you, you know, your email. We should show you updates from your social network. So I think that, you know, context can play a big role. And interestingly, context, location can also help us tap into a level of accuracy that we haven't seen before. There's all kinds of really difficult searches that we aren't good at today. And I remember one day.
What would be an example? What are we not good at?
Well, one day, you know, for example, I mean, there's just some searches you can't do without context, or you can't do very well. So there was one day where I cataloged all the searches I didn't do, either because I didn't have a device available for search, or because it's just not possible to do them. The query of, what is that bird over there, is like impossible to do a search on. You could describe it, you could take a picture, what would you do with a picture? But if you can take a picture, and now with things like Google goggles and visual recognition, we can find the bird, and we can figure out that it's brown, and it's rough size and scale. And now, not only do we know that it's a brown bird, but we know that it's January, and you're in Northern California. You know, you can narrow it from, you know, 3,000 brown birds to maybe 5 or 10, at which point in time, a searcher can just visually pick through those answers. So something that would be completely impossible, a bird with no context, identify it. Suddenly becomes much easier when you have context, location, and time.
That, I have to say, that excites me, because when I've traveled and I've seen birds and I'm like, what is that absolutely gorgeous bird, right? And you have this sense, and I've tried Google goggles and it hasn't given me the answer. So
we're getting there, but context will help. Context will help.
I'm just telling you.
And of course, then there's always the zoo problem. But the good news is now with Google Maps, hopefully we'll know you're at the zoo, and we'll know that all bets are off as to species. But
you know, you manage a lot of people now, right? So how many people do you actually manage at Google?
Well, in total, it's about 6,000, but it's about 1,100 full-time employees. Because we also have, in a contract capacity, we have the Street View drivers, we have various people who are helping us produce our map tiles, our actual drawings of maps, verify the accuracy of that local information.
I wonder, I mean, one of the things that was always so interesting about Google in the early days was a real desire, I think, to keep it a place where you could be imaginative and creative about computer science and engineering. How do you do that when, I mean, now, as you said, it's 30,000 people. You've bought Motorola Mobility, so that's going to increase the number. Do you find that working with so many people, you can still be really creative as a computer scientist?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because a lot of it has to do with your specific group and ideas that you're excited about. Right, and so
like,
yes, you know, you could choose to be overwhelmed by just how big things are, but you know, day to day, right, you're generally working with a small team, right? There's probably, you know, 3 or 4 people on your core team, and even on your extended team, it might be, you know, 20 or 30. But the nice thing about Google, and one of the things that I've always found really exciting about working there, is there's a lot more work than people. And it's sort of interesting, there's some people where when they walk into an environment and you realize, oh my gosh, there's no way we could ever get everything done that we need to get done, they get completely overwhelmed. And there's other people who are like, wow, we're never going to get done everything we need to get done, which means there's so much that I could do that would actually be useful and helpful. And you know, Google is very much still in that space. There's a lot of interesting things we want to do. I mean, like, what we can do with location, what we can do with context, how we can help people get places more efficiently. You know, last year we introduced a feature called Route Around Traffic. So you could actually plant your route and actually say, no, like, take me away from the red areas on Google Maps. And it's crazy, but you know, it saves something like, you know, I think it was like, I don't even remember the numbers, but it's like almost 1 million hours a day that are saved in terms of like people, you know, and if you start thinking about what that is, it's just a huge amount of productivity and ways that people can spend their time. But like little things like that where you'd be like, well, wait, like how much of an impact can helping people avoid traffic be? And it can really, and it can really actually, it can really help. And it's a small insight. It's a hard computer science problem to be able to try and predict traffic, to understand how to route someone around it, and actually.
How do you encourage that, though? I mean, when you have so many people, I think one of the hard things is encouraging that kind of creativity so that everybody feels some sense. I mean, are there still sort of policies? There used to be, I don't know if it still exists, the 20% policy, right? You could work on a project that just interested you. Is Google still doing that with all these people?
Yeah, we still have 20% time, but 20% time was always very unstructured. And the principle of 20% time was that you could spend up to 1 day a week working on whatever you felt most passionate about and whatever you were most excited about. And for a lot of people, that's their core project. They're actually on what they care most about. But for people who start to look around and say, you know what, I'm really excited about this area and I don't see anyone else working on it, and I think there's something there, they can really tap into that, and it's a way of bringing new ideas into the fold.
You are obviously very excited about computer science. And it's wonderful, and it is exciting. So we were talking about how to get more women to major in it. And you were saying we just need more computer scientists, period. You sort of almost felt like we don't want to, at this point, even emphasize getting more women. If we can just get more, period, we'll be in good shape. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, I think that overall we're not producing enough computer scientists. When you start to look at where technology is going, how many people we need to be capable of programming or be capable of understanding it, we're just not producing nearly enough computer scientists. And also, one of my longtime mentors has been Professor Eric Roberts at Stanford, who is really very interested in computer science education. And Eric shared some stats with me, basically go like this. About 200,000 students a year take the advanced placement calculus test. Right? So it means they've taken college-level math in high school for credit. Only 14,000 students take the advanced placement computer science test. So if you imagine that most people who are good at math and capable of taking college-level math in high school should also be capable of taking college-level computer science, right now we're running at about 7%. Right, about 7% of people who think they're good at math and like try and take that AP test in math take it in computer science. An outside study done of Google engineers indicates that 98% of them were exposed to computer science in high school. Which basically means when you leave high school and you haven't had computer science, you have a 2% chance of working at Google. And I just think that there's all kinds of things that need to change in terms of those statistics. There's stereotypes and stigmas that need to be removed from computer science so more people try it early. There needs to be more focus on the solving side of it so people understand the applications of it. There's got to be more people capable of teaching computer science at that introductory level in high schools. A lot of times it's actually in the business department as opposed to being a department in and of itself or being in with the math department. And so I think that those are all things that ultimately will need to change. And I think that now a lot of people will focus on, well, what's the percentage of women, relative to the overall piece. And I think that's the wrong question to ask, right? Like we need to take that pie of 14,000 and make it a pie of 200,000. Right, and in doing that, there absolutely will be more, on an absolute basis, there will be more women computer scientists, right? And if at the end of that process we still have an imbalance, let's worry about it then. But right now, while we're still growing the interest in computer science, growing the numbers to really sustain the type of work and type of innovation we as a country and a society would like to have, the focus really should be on getting more young people, regardless of gender, interested in computer science. And if at the end of that growth process, we still have an imbalance, we can deal with that then. But for now, let's just get more.
You know, I mean, oftentimes when people talk about you, they do comment on your dress and all of that, and I guess that's something women always get. But maybe that's a good thing a little bit in this way, that people can see like, oh, this is what a computer scientist can look like.
I don't know, my mother will tell you that I just always loved clothes. I loved clothes, I loved color. Like, you know, she would say, as a child, I would go through like 2 or 3 outfits a day. I just liked clothes, I liked trying them all on. Like, I'm sure I drove her a little bit crazy, but I do think that just, you know, being true to who you are and not feeling the need to conform is something that is important. I remember one of my during one of my chemistry courses, I had some lab partners that were just not really sure that I should be taken seriously. And I remember someone telling me, well, you know, don't wash your hair for a few days and put on a pair of glasses. Just get some of those glasses that don't actually have corrective lenses and start showing up like, and I just thought, no, I'm just not going to do that. Like, I'm not going to, like, you know, do that. Like, it's not who I am. I'm going to show up and I'm going to do a good job in lab every day, and I'm going to win the respect of these guys because I'm actually good at lab work, not because I went a little grunge, and that's not me.
Well, good. All right. Well, this will be a little reminiscing here. You mentioned that in 1999 there were already 8 search engines. To help us reminisce, what were they? And how many of them exist today?
Oh, let's see. Alta Vista, Lycos, InfoSeek, Dogpile, Ask Jeeves, GoTo, which eventually became Overture. Oh, Yahoo, yeah. That's embarrassing. Eventually Yahoo became Google, so that's why I sort of, you know, because we started powering them, so. But yeah, so, and technically Ink2Me, who was powering Yahoo at the time, so that's at least 8, but there were probably even more than that.
I know, and I'm trying to think which of those. Ask Jeeves.
Excite. Yeah,
that's right. There was Excite.
I forgot the biggies. I was thinking about all the people who were very specialized on search, but yeah.
Yeah, and Yahoo. Well, and now Yahoo. There's another search engine that didn't exist then, whose name maybe we won't say tonight. No, we will. Bing. So there is that, but there aren't. I mean, there really aren't many competitors in the market. As of course has come up, we're not going to go down that road, but it really has shrunk, and competition is probably a good thing.
I think competition is a very good thing. You know, I actually think that, you know, we were sad to actually see the consolidation between Bing and Yahoo, because actually having 3 search engines, 3 different crawlers, 3 different ways of indexing, 3 different ways of finding things was actually really interesting, and it does breed more innovation. We really think that the rising tide floats all boats, and the more people who are working on search and thinking about search and experimenting with it causes everyone, you know, it causes everyone to raise their game, and that helps the end user.
So we kind of talked about this, but it's phrased a little differently by this questioner. He says, you know, Google seems to acquire new companies on a large scale compared to other technology companies. I mean, you have done a lot of acquisitions. What are your thoughts on the feasibility of Larry's goal of maintaining startup mentality for Google, and how's he doing in your opinion?
Sure. We do a lot of acquisitions. Last year we did almost an acquisition a week. I think that we did about 50 acquisitions last year. But that said, you know, I think really have it down to a good system of integrating people into the company, and you know, a lot of them are small companies where we're doing a talent acquisition for a particular type of engineer or a particular type of expertise. But I think overall Larry's been doing a great job. You know, his goal was to increase speed and velocity. As I talked about earlier, that notion that we didn't need meetings. There were 4 of us sitting in an office and we could just make a decision together without even calling a meeting. You know, we're trying to get back to that. So it's really clear how decisions get made. They get made fast, right? I mean, like, as you get big, there comes this moment where you're waiting for the weekly meeting to make a decision, right? And you know, one of the goals now is never let a decision wait for a meeting. If it becomes clear that a decision needs to be made, you know, gather the data, make that decision on its timetable. Don't hold the decision for that Tuesday afternoon review or the Friday afternoon review or whenever it is.
It's
so
funny.
so you pull the meeting and the conversations into a less formal setting,
Right.
as you need to, as opposed to queuing up decisions, because that ultimately slows you down.
Yeah, I think those of us who've ever worked in a company know something about waiting for a decision from above. So in the future, will Google produce hardware for the software or just distribute the software?
Yeah, we have made some hardware. We've done a lot in partnerships. So we did some partnerships early on for Android with
Right.
HTC and released the Nexus. And so, the Motorola acquisition is still pending, so we can't say a lot about it. But it certainly is our intention to have that hardware business be a way that we can showcase some of what's new and interesting on Android. So having, a phone that can act as a benchmark in terms of what we think works well for Android, in terms of the number of pixels on the screen and how many lumens it is and battery life and things like that. And I think it's going to be a good opportunity for us to experiment there.
Apple and Facebook are innovative companies generating market worth maybe 2 times Google. How does Google measure its innovativeness? Is Google doing the best it can? Well, I guess you would say yes, you're doing the best you can, or maybe you're not. I don't know. What do you think?
I think that we're very proud of a lot of the innovation that we've come up with over the years, and even recently. Just yesterday we launched Search Plus Your World, thinking about how to take search, make it more personal, start to pull in some of the social content and recommendations from around the web. Android I think is very innovative. Chrome is very innovative. Maps is just, we're just getting started. A few years ago people were wowed by drag and drop maps in the browser, and when you think about how that's come until today, now we actually have what we call personalized smart maps. Like, on your Android phone, we actually start to look for what you normally search for with your permission and start to light up the map a different way. And draw, we ultimately would love to get to a place where maps are so personalized that they're almost like phones. Where like if I handed you my map, you'd be like, this is your map, it's not my map, I can't use your map the same way it's hard to use someone else's phone. You can imagine saying, what is your personalized lens onto the world? So there's all kinds of exciting places we can go, and we try to get it focused on that and the opportunities and less on the competition.
I know you just released a new product, Google Plus Your World, which I imagine must be sort of part of this scheme of personalizing maps, and that's part of the bigger picture, yes?
That's right. Well, because Search Plus Your World is on Google Search.
Right.
And obviously about 20% of searches are local, so there's certainly some local content. We have businesses now on Google Plus, so some of those are recommended, and
yeah, and
we're pulling
they
this all
just
together.
released this product,
I
right?
think it was yesterday.
Right,
Yeah.
and it sort of will search your personal information on Google Plus, on Picasa for photos. The thing, as I said, Amit Singhal explained it to me, and I said, but it doesn't do Facebook or Twitter. You guys, I wish you would all play nice together.
Well, we can't search what we can't have access to. So we're searching what we can at this point, and I do think it's nice because one of the things we've learned is that there are different axes of relevance. There's you typed in New Zealand, what are the most authoritative web pages in the world on New Zealand? But it's also nice to be able to see that, oh, your friend was there a month ago, and these are their posts, and this is where they stayed, and this is what they liked. And so, having some access to that social and personal element of search and what's relevant to you is really important in the context of doing great web search.
Being a VP in a company like Google, how do you balance work and your personal life?
So my philosophy on this is simply stated, find your rhythm. And I think that people talk a lot about burnout. And in Silicon Valley, when people are coding all night, working 80, 100 hours a week, a lot of people also think that Google just happened. And Google didn't just happen. It was 100 hours a week, and it went on for years. For my first 5 years at Google, I pulled an all-nighter in the office at least once a week. So that's 250 all-nighters in the office, right? And so people, would actually talk to me a lot about burnout, are the people around you burning out? Would you burn out? And I was like, what? If you look at history, there's a lot of very successful people who've worked really, really hard for arbitrarily long periods of time. And one is you need to be passionate about it. But two, I just have a different philosophy around burnout than a lot of people do. I think that burnout happens because of resentment. It's that notion that wow, I worked 100 hours last week and I couldn't even have this thing that I really wanted. I couldn't have this time, or I couldn't have that. And for a lot of people, what they want is 8 hours of sleep a night, 3 meals a day, time with family at home, some of the classic balance things that come up. But for each person, it's different. So one of the things I've done as a manager is, if I see someone who I think is working really hard and may not have everything quite in balance, though I'm not a big fan of the balance word, I'll say, tell me what your rhythm is. Tell me what it is that when you miss it, or when you can't have it, you feel resentful towards your team, towards me, towards Google. Think about it. And I've gotten all kinds of interesting answers from that exercise. A couple of great examples. There was a guy, Nathan, on my team who was 1 year out of school, working really hard. I said, Nathan, what's your rhythm? Tell me what your rhythm is. And he came back and he said, Tuesday night dinner. I said, tell me what Tuesday night dinner is. He's like, my friends and I that all graduated together, every Tuesday night we get together and have a potluck at someone's apartment. And he's like, and if I miss it, or even worse, if I have to cancel it when it's supposed to be at my place, I'm resentful the whole rest of the week. Every night, 6, 7 o'clock rolls around, and he's like, I couldn't even go to Tuesday night dinner, so no, I'm not staying late tonight. And I was like, okay, well then Nathan, now we know, we're never gonna have you miss another Tuesday night dinner. Right? So and I was like, now it's partially my job to make sure that you get out of here on Tuesday nights and that people don't ask you to just stay late just this one night this week. Right? And I had a soccer mom with 3 kids, Katie, and she was working on Google Finance, and her team was in Bangalore. And she kept doing video conference calls at 1 in the morning. And I was really worried about her. And she kept telling me, look, the 1 a.m. conference calls, they don't bother me. They really don't bother me. And I said, well, tell me what your rhythm is. And she came back and she said, it's my kids. She's like, if I miss the soccer game, or I'm 5 minutes late for the recital and walking in the middle of their piece, she's like, the whole rest of the week, I'm doing these calls at 1 in the morning, and I couldn't even be there on time, my child, or I couldn't even be there for the soccer game. And I said, okay, then Katie, now we know, we're never going to have you miss or be late for something for your kids again. And it was interesting to watch, because we'd be in meetings, and it would be I know Katie had that 4 o'clock game, and it'd be 3:40, and she'd be getting up to go, and people would be like, oh, Katie, can't you just stay for 5 more minutes? We're almost done. Then we don't have to meet again tomorrow. And I'd be like, no, Katie's got to go. Right? Because it was that kind of pull. And so you have to figure out, what is it that you want, that when you can't get it, you're resentful of it.
Did you find that the work you got out of them was more focused?
Oh, absolutely. And so, I know for me, and I do think it changes at different stages of people's lives, and for me, it's been travel, just for sort of my own sanity, and maybe for my team's sanity too. Every 4 months or so, I like to just walk out of the office for a week, go somewhere I haven't been. So, really being honest with yourself about what is it that you really want. Yes, you can work arbitrarily hard, especially if you're working on something that you love, but is there something in there, like Tuesday night dinner, or never being late for the kids, or travel every few months, that if you don't have that, you're like, wow, why am I working this hard if I can't even have that thing?
Well, speaking of time, I think we're about out of it. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
It has been quite a journey so far for Marissa Mayer, from her beginnings in Wisconsin to the National Youth Science Camp, on to Stanford University, Vice President at Google, and now CEO of Yahoo. There are many stories like this at the Computer History Museum. Please join us next time for another episode of Revolutionary.